Hello, I'm Dawn Durham, and welcome to PaTTANpod. We're here at the National Autism Conference talking to Dave Palmer. Dave, thanks for stopping by PaTTANpod today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So I want to talk a little bit when we think about some principles that really guide our instruction, particularly for students with autism. Are there any principles of behavior that you feel are most important that we should be thinking about?
Well, I'm not an expert in the field of autism the way most of the people you're interviewing or have interviewed today are, so I thought I would mention some things that are a little bit off the beaten track that other people might not have mentioned already.
Please.
One thing I wanted to emphasize was the need for effective reinforcers. When you work with an animal in a laboratory, when reinforcement occurs, there's an immediate effect on behavior because the animal hasn't eaten in 12 hours or more, and so the animal is really excited about the arrival of food. And when working with a child with autism or other disabilities, or even just any child, it's often the case that what you're choosing as a reinforcer is not quite as exciting as food for a hungry rat. So the reinforcement is a powerful tool, provided that the reinforcer is in fact effective for that person at that time under those motivating conditions. Second, people get sick of eating the same potato chips over and over and over again pretty quickly. Not that potato chips are necessarily what's used as a reinforcer, but I mean, you want to check to make sure that your reinforcer is still effective as
doing something
as the session goes on and on and on, because something may be effective at 10 o'clock, but at 10:05, you're sick of hearing "good job," or or it may just be that there are more exciting things to do over there, or up there, or down here, or in my own world. In the absence of effective reinforcement, a lot of procedures might look as though they're ineffective. Well, they will be ineffective if the reinforcer is ineffective. But it's not necessarily a problem with the analysis or the experiment or the design, simply a failure to find an effective reinforcer. And I don't have any magic suggestions for this. You can't starve your kids, but just always keep alert for the possibility that your reinforcer, which seemed like a wonderful thing in a choice task when you started the session, maybe they're completely sick of it by the time they've had 3 or 4 stars or stickers or gummy bears or whatever it may be.
So when we think about positive reinforcement, it needs to be very personalized to the student, but also be monitored so that it continues to be exciting and be worth the effort.
Yes, I think that's the point. Keep on monitoring the effectiveness of the reinforcer, and if it seems to have lost its zip,
we need to find something else.
Find something else, or maybe terminate the session and come back at a later time, rather than blaming the design of the procedure itself, which of course there could be problems with the procedure, but I think that people assume that a reinforcer is going to be a reinforcer more or less steadily throughout a session, and that's not likely to be true.
Okay, then that's good to know going into the session, right? Is knowing that
Absolutely.
I need to be prepared to change it up, to keep that zip, to keep that excitement going, so that the student or students I'm working with can want to continue in that behavior.
Right.
So I think that's a key piece. You had written an article about atomic repertoires. So if you could, for a moment here, help us all understand that concept, but more importantly, how does that apply to classroom instruction and classroom teaching?
Well, I think most people have a very intuitive notion of this, but the concept of atomic repertoires is that there are things that we learn usually in very early childhood, that are little tiny pieces of behavior that are under the control of very specific kinds of environmental stimuli or social stimuli. So, for example, the alphabet would be a perfect example. When I see the letter B, I can say B or I can say B. When I'm reading a text, I can sound out some unfamiliar word. So let's say it's some chemical compound, bimethyl triethyl oxalate or something. I can sort of sound out the word because I have the atomic part is that they're little tiny pieces that have been assembled in a novel concatenation. But I can respond on the very first trial correctly to this novel sequence of stimuli because I have a specific response to each one. So the letters of the alphabet is one example, but imitative behavior would be another example. Children learn to imitate this, and they learn to imitate this, and they learn to imitate this, and they learn to imitate this, and so on. But they do not have, they don't know how to imitate hopping on a pogo stick or riding a unicycle or playing the violin. That is, it's not the case that people can just imitate anything. You have to have the component imitative skills to imitate some complex task. So for an example I like to use is this one. Can you imitate this? Well, you say, sure I can, but then which finger is actually moving? Is it my right hand, middle finger? Is it my left hand thumb? You have to actually look at it and break it down verbally to imitate the behavior. You can't simply imitate it as some kind of innate ability. You have to have the control by the specific visual stimuli controlling specific elements of behavior. Another example of an atomic repertoire, let me go back to what atomic means. It means it's a little piece, a little piece of behavior that can be reliably evoked by a little piece of environment. So we all acquire, most of us acquire an echoic repertoire as children. That is, you say banana and I say banana. You say some novel word I've never heard, deoxytrimethyl oxalate, and I can repeat it, provided it's not too long. Even though I've never said the word before, because I have that
tiny pieces that you're able to pull apart.
Yes, you assemble the stimuli in a particular sequence, and I can deliver the response in that same sequence because I have a one-to-one relationship to all the elements of the stimulus. Now, what the relevance of this is that most human behavior is not shaped. That is, we don't learn. For example, you could say the capital of Pennsylvania is
Harrisburg.
Harrisburg. Okay. Well, now I know what the capital of Pennsylvania is. It's Harrisburg. But if you wanted to shape that behavior, you would sort of wait around for me to go, boo da dee da, huh. And as soon as I said ha, you say yeah, more ha. I go ha, he ha, hoo ha, ooh. And whenever I said ha, ha, whenever I say ha, you say good, Palmer. And then ha, hab, hack, had, hair. Yes. You'd have to shape up all the little elements of this thing. It would take you forever. It would take you all day long to get me to say Harrisburg through shaping. But simply by modeling it, bingo, there it is in a single trial. In most human behaviors of this sort, where it's acquired on the first trial because the teacher or the natural environment has arranged a permutation of molecular stimuli to evoke the same permutation of molecular responses, and you get the behavior right away, and then it can be reinforced, and we can move on. I now know that the capital of Pennsylvania is Harrisburg. So it's a huge advance over shaping, and yet shaping is what we learn in the textbooks. And of course, we all know intuitively and experientially that if you want a kid to say something, you model it. But what the atomic repertoire idea is sort of a conceptualization of what exactly the elements are. And so you want to make sure that the child has all of those little elements under the control of all these specific antecedents in order to get that permutation of behavior.
So when we're thinking about a classroom instruction or a classroom setting, I'm getting more student response. I'm getting more, eliciting more response and active response from my students instead of shaping and taking, as you said, all day to get to the word Harrisburg, but providing an environment and information and stimuli to get each of these little individual pieces so that the response is quicker, it's more immediate, and we can continue on and get into more instruction versus kind of carrying it out all day. Am I correct? Am I correct in understanding this?
Yes, but of course, most people learn these atomic repertoires very, very early, sort of offline. That is, not in the class. Well, we learn the alphabet perhaps in the classroom. But let's take something like sight reading of music. Now, this is something that a lot of people can't do. Well, there's a one-to-one relationship between what's on the musical staff and the note on the piano, and if you want a child to play the piano, you can teach. If you want the child to play the Moonlight Sonata, you can say, okay, put this finger here, and you can get the child to play the notes. But if you can teach the child that this note means that key and this note means that key, then you can give the child an infinite number of musical scores, and the child may not be concert piano quality, but the child can pick out the tune using the stimuli on the page.
That one-to-one aspect.
That one-to-one aspect is what we mean by an atomic repertoire. Atomic just means that it's a little tiny unit of behavior that can be combined with other units of behavior to give you something, a bigger unit of behavior.
To build on.
Yeah, like Harrisburg is the combination of and so rather than having to shape up each one of the little elements, you can present the permutation as a string, and I can respond on the first trial.
And having those atomic pieces, then I could generalize those or transfer those pieces to other stimuli that might have that small individual piece put over here, right?
Yes,
I mean, that would be the transferability of it.
Right. That is, it's almost infinitely permutable. That is, you can get me to say Harrisburg, you can get me to say Moscow or London or Paris or any word you like, any word that can be pronounced in the English language or whatever language we're speaking in, using this concatenation of letters. That is, anything you can echo. You'll be able to say essentially an unlimited number of novel things correctly, or close enough to correctly, to get reinforcement right away without having to shape the behavior. So a huge economy in time, teaching time. Of course, people know this intuitively without knowing anything about the term atomic repertoire. People have an intuitive understanding of this. It's just a way of analyzing that aspect
of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about some of the work that you've done kind of away from the conference, but here at the conference, you're talking about analysis of logic and math in relationship to verbal behavior. So that's your kind of your topic here while you're here at the conference. Can you share with us some core aspects of analysis of verbal behavior that allow it to be useful across many fields of inquiry?
Yes. Okay. Well, I made some notes to myself, and I just wanted to refer to them so I don't get off on a tangent. Okay, so possibly one of the many important things about verbal behavior is that a speaker is also a listener. That is, assuming the person has normal hearing and normal articulation, which is most of us. Of course, we have to make special arrangements for people who have different kinds of deficits, but most people hear themselves speak as they speak, and when you speak, I speak along with you. That may not seem as though that's happening, but in fact it is happening. That is, not if I'm not paying attention to you, if I'm sort of filing my nails and saying, oh, da da da, when is lunch? And you're talking away about Harrisburg. And a minute later you say, what did Dawn talk about? I'll say, gosh, I have no idea. But if I'm listening, what listening means is to behave along with the speaker. And usually that means to speak along with the speaker. There are also other discriminative responses we engage in. But the fact that we both speak and listen is an extremely important concept. And second, speech easily recedes to the covert level and is still effective. That is, I can say to myself, okay, 12 times 12 is 144, 144 minus 16 is 128, and so on. That is, I can do that kind of stuff out loud, or it's essentially equally effective, maybe not quite as effective, if I do it covertly, which means that I have this ability to sort of preserve verbal behavior over long periods of time. I can rehearse something. If you say, oh, the phone number for the patent office is 869-2304, I'll forget it immediately unless I say 869-2304, 869-2304, 869-2304, and eventually I get to the phone and
You write it down.
Or yes, I write it down. That would be even better. An atomic repertoire. Atomic repertoire of writing is another example. So that ability to preserve the stimulus, if you will, more or less indefinitely as covert rehearsals is very important. Another extremely important concept is that of automatic reinforcement through matching, or what I call parity. That is, if you say Harrisburg and I say Harrisville, I can hear that I haven't said it quite right. So I'd say, what was it again? You say Harrisburg, and now I say Harrisburg, and I say, I've got it. That is, it's automatically reinforcing when I can detect that what I said was what you said, and it's automatically punishing when I detect that I have misspoken what you said.
There's mismatch there.
And it's not common for there to be a mismatch when they're common English words where we both share a vocabulary. But if you're a speaker of Serbo-Croatian and you say the Serbo-Croatian word for watermelon is blah 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 blah, I'll have a heck of a time because I don't have the right vocal repertoire for imitating. I don't have the atomic repertoire for imitating that, and I can detect that I'm wrong, and if I keep at it, I can perhaps detect when I'm right. So that automatic reinforcement permits automatic shaping of my behavior without the need for a parent to pat me on the back every time I've gotten a little bit closer. So children learn a lot of verbal behavior simply by trying to and successfully matching the behavior of adults or peers or big brothers and so on.
So I think having a good base knowledge of what are the core pieces of that verbal behavior helps in, not just the classroom setting, but as you said, a parent setting or just understanding behavior in general. So I think that's the key pieces. I want to just jump a little bit to, at PaTTAnpod, our goal is to inspire educational growth, and we want folks out there who are viewing or listening to this episode to really think and be inspired to grow professionally. And we ask this of all of our guests. So I'm excited, Dave, that you're able to offer this advice too. What advice might you have to those folks who are listening or viewing this episode for them?
Well, I think the most important thing someone can do to grow professionally is to do what you can to learn from other people. That is, if you imagine someone trying to learn some skill like Robinson Crusoe on an island all by yourself, you have to have all the lucky breaks to learn all the tricks of the trade. And it might take you your entire lifetime to finally learn, doggone, I should have been monitoring the effectiveness of the reinforcer over time. So going to meetings like the PaTTAN conferences is an excellent thing to do for someone who's trying to improve his or her skills, because you get exposed to lots and lots and lots of people who are all working on roughly the same kinds of problems, all of whom have had a little lucky break or insight or solved some thorny little problem. And the spread of that knowledge and expertise at a meeting like this is very, very great. And when you don't take advantage of meetings like this, you are more or less forced back onto textbooks and technical articles in the literature, plus your own experience and your colleagues. Of course, your colleagues can be fabulously helpful, but it's simply a matter of drawing from a larger pool. The larger the pool of expertise you can draw on, the more effective you will be. And so I think conferences, especially conferences that are devoted to the domain in which you work, are, as opposed to something that's just more general.
Like too broad.
Too broad. Educational conferences would be too broad, or even the national meetings of the of the Association of Behavior Analysis would be quite broad. This conference is more focused. But anyway, the point is that drawing from a pool of experts or just colleagues is the surest way to improve one's skills. I would kind of look askance at reading the technical literature. That is, you might think, well, I should be reading the journals every day. Well, there's a lot of stuff that's published. You could spend your entire life reading half of the stuff that's published every year, and a lot of it wouldn't be that. Some of it would not be that helpful to you. What you want to do is find those things that are really best for yourself. And I don't know that reading technical articles kind of blindly is an efficient way of getting what you need to know. I think that's why going to a meeting where you can approach a speaker after the talk and say, what about this little problem? And then can direct you straight to a paper that might be relevant, or give you face-to-face advice that would be very relevant. So I guess in one word I would say, go to PaTTAN meetings.
Well, we certainly think PaTTAN is a pretty amazing place to find that. But pulling from your pool of experts, I think you that's really the key crux of it is going to places like the National Autism Conference,
right.
Going to your PaTTAN resources, going to your intermediate unit resources, and really using them as your go-to source, because
right.
they have access or can open the world or the doors for you to people like yourself and to those that we've spoken with today and that are presenting here at the Autism Conference. So I think that's a good piece to be thinking about, and I appreciate that advice from you. And we're glad that you're here at the National Autism Conference. We know that everyone attending and those who are live streaming and will be checking out recorded sessions will also be gaining some knowledge from your talks today. So thank you so much for joining PaTTAnpod. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you to all of you in the field. You inspire educational growth in your students every day. A special thank you to John Ragsdale for producing this podcast. We'll see you next time on PaTTAnpod.